The Night Watchman. Michael Garrison stared out the window of the security booth, watching as the last car left the parking lot of the Westfield Commercial Center. The headlights swept across the darkened building before disappearing into the Chicago night, leaving him alone with the silence that would be his only companion for the next 8 hours. At 43, Michael's face carried the weathered lines of a man who had seen more than his share of disappointment. His once military posture had softened over the years, and the security uniform that had once fit snugly now hung loosely on his frame. 3 years as the night watchman had taught him that the hours between midnight and dawn stretched longer than any others. 3 years since Sarah had taken the kids and left. 3 years since he'd lost his construction business to debt and poor management. 3 years of existing rather than living. Another night in paradise, he muttered to himself, the familiar ritual of clocking in and checking the monitors, offering little comfort in the vast emptiness of the building. The security booth was a small room near the main entrance, outfitted with monitors showing feeds from cameras throughout the building. It contained a desk, a small refrigerator, a microwave, and a worn office chair that creaked whenever he shifted his weight. The walls were bare, except for a schedule and emergency contact information. He pulled out a half-empty bottle of bourbon from his backpack and poured a generous amount into his coffee. The burning sensation as he swallowed had become a faithful friend, numbing the edges of his thoughts just enough to make the night bearable. His routine was always the same. Check the monitors, make his rounds every 2 hours, and fill the time between with whatever distraction he could find, usually mindless games on his phone or staring into nothingness, letting memories wash over him until the pain became too much. That night, something compelled him to open the desk drawer where the previous security guards had left various items over the years. Among the forgotten pens, outdated manuals, and fast food napkins, his hand found a small leather-bound book with worn edges, a Bible. He couldn't remember ever seeing it before, though he'd rummaged through that drawer countless times searching for battery replacements or paper clips. Michael wasn't a religious man. He had attended church sporadically as a child, but whatever faith he might have had was buried under years of indifference and, more recently, bitterness. Still, something about the old book caught his attention. Perhaps it was simply the need for something, anything, new to occupy his mind during the long night ahead. He set the Bible aside and continued his first round of checks. The building was quiet, the only sounds the hum of the heating system and his own footsteps echoing through empty corridors. Upon returning to his post, he found his gaze drawn back to the small book, as if it were somehow waiting for him. "What the hell?" he muttered, picking it up. The leather was soft and smooth from years of handling. The pages were thin and delicate, with handwritten notes in the margins. Someone had clearly treasured this book once. He opened it randomly, not expecting much. His eyes fell on a passage that had been underlined in faded blue ink. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11. Michael read the verse twice, then a third time. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. Plans for hope and a future? Where was that hope when his wife walked out, taking their children with her? Where was that future when he lost everything he had worked for? And yet, something about those words lingered in his mind as he set the Bible down and returned to his coffee and bourbon. The night stretched on, the words echoing in his thoughts despite his attempts to push them away. The following nights fell into the same pattern. Michael would arrive at the Westfield Commercial Center at midnight, check the security systems, and settle in for his shift. But now, each night, he found himself reaching for the Bible, opening it to random pages, reading passages that somehow seemed to speak directly to his situation. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Psalm 23:4. He tried to dismiss the words as empty promises, the kind of comforting lies people tell themselves when reality becomes too harsh. Yet, each night, he found himself reading more, his bourbon consumption gradually decreasing as his interest in the text increased. One night, during his 2 a.m. rounds, Michael heard a noise coming from the alley behind the building. He tensed, hand moving instinctively to the flashlight on his belt. In 3 years, he dealt with a few break-in attempts and several instances of homeless people seeking shelter against the building's walls. Outside, the December air bit at his face as he rounded the corner. His flashlight beam revealed a hunched figure trying to find shelter near the building's heating vent. "Hey!" Michael called out, his voice harsher than intended. "You can't stay here." The figure turned, revealing a man perhaps in his 60s, with a weathered face and eyes that held a mixture of fear and resignation. "I'm sorry, sir," the man said, his voice hoarse. "It's just so cold tonight. I wasn't trying to break in or nothing, just trying to keep warm." Michael had always followed protocol in these situations, firmly but not unkindly asking trespassers to leave. Occasionally, he'd look the other way if the weather was particularly bad, giving them until dawn before they had to move on. Tonight, though, he hesitated. "What's your name?" he asked. "Thomas. Most folks call me Tom." Michael studied the man. His clothes were worn but not filthy, suggesting he hadn't been on the streets for long. There was a dignity in the way he stood, despite his circumstances. "How long have you been homeless, Tom?" The question surprised both of them. It wasn't part of the usual script. "About 6 months," Tom replied after a moment. "Lost my job when the factory closed, then my apartment. Been trying to get back on my feet, but—" He gestured vaguely, the universal sign for when life spirals beyond control. Michael thought of the verse he had read earlier that evening. "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers. For by so doing some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." Hebrews 13:2. He made a decision that would later mark the beginning of his transformation. "Look, Tom, I can't let you stay out here, company policy, but," he hesitated, "I've got a break room inside with a couch. You can stay there until morning. Just be gone before the day shift arrives at 8 a.m. Tom's eyes widened in surprise. "You'd do that for me?" "Yeah," Michael said, somewhat surprised at himself. "I would." As they walked back into the building, Michael felt something shift inside him, a small warmth where cold emptiness had resided for so long. That night, while Tom slept on the break room couch, Michael continued reading the Bible, the words seeming to take on new meaning as he considered the man sleeping nearby. He wondered what Sarah would think of his small act of kindness. She had always been the compassionate one, always helping others while he focused on building his business. The memory of her didn't sting quite as much as it usually did. Over the following weeks, Michael's nightly Bible readings became more intentional. He found himself looking forward to discovering new passages, understanding contexts, and even praying hesitantly, awkward, halting prayers that felt strange on his lips but increasingly natural in his heart. Tom returned several times during particularly cold nights, and Michael always let him in. They began to talk during Michael's breaks, sharing pieces of their stories. Tom had been a factory worker for 30 years before outsourcing had eliminated his position. With no savings and no family to turn to, he had quickly found himself on the streets. "The hardest part isn't the cold or the hunger," Tom confided one night. "It's the invisibility. People look right through you like you don't exist anymore." Michael nodded, understanding something about invisibility himself. Since his divorce, he had withdrawn from friends and acquaintances, becoming a ghost in his own life. "I've been thinking," Michael said slowly, "about what it would take to help people like you, not just with a warm place for one night, but something more permanent." Tom looked at him with surprise. "That's a big undertaking." "Yeah," Michael agreed. "But I keep reading about how faith without action is dead, and I'm starting to think maybe that's been my problem all along. Plenty of talk, not enough walk." It was the first time he had verbalized the stirring in his heart, the sense that he was being called to something beyond the confines of his security booth and the limitations of his self-imposed isolation. That weekend, instead of spending his day off in his small apartment with the blinds drawn, Michael attended a church service for the first time in years. He chose a small community church several blocks from his apartment, slipping into a back pew just as the service began. The music washed over him, familiar yet new. The sermon, delivered by a middle-aged pastor named David Williams, focused on second chances and God's redemptive power. Michael found himself listening intently, recognizing his own story in the biblical narratives of fall and redemption. After the service, he lingered, wanting to speak with the pastor but unsure how to approach him. As the congregation filtered out, Pastor Williams noticed Michael and walked over. "I don't believe we've met," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Williams." "Michael Garrison," he replied, shaking the pastor's hand. I haven't been to church in a long time." Pastor Williams smiled. "Well, we're glad you're here today. What brought you in?" Michael hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I found a Bible at work, started reading it, felt like I should come." They spoke for nearly an hour, Michael sharing fragments of his story: the failed business, the broken marriage, the night watchman job, and the homeless man who had somehow become a catalyst for change. Pastor Williams listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that helped Michael articulate thoughts he'd been struggling to define. "It sounds like God is working in your life, Michael," the pastor said finally. "That desire to help others, especially the homeless, that's not something to ignore." "I wouldn't know where to start," Michael admitted. "Start small," Pastor Williams advised. "We have a ministry that serves meals at the homeless shelter downtown every Wednesday. Why don't you join us this week? See where it leads." Michael agreed, feeling both apprehension and a strange sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. The following Wednesday found Michael at the downtown shelter, helping serve meals alongside other volunteers from Pastor Williams' church. The experience was both humbling and eye-opening. He saw people from all walks of life: families with children, veterans, elderly men and women, young people barely out of their teens. Each had a story, each had dignity beneath their circumstances, and each reminded Michael of Tom in some way. He returned the next Wednesday and the next. Soon he was volunteering on Saturdays as well. He learned names and stories, offered not just food but conversation and respect. The frozen parts of his heart began to thaw as he connected with those he served. At work, Michael continued his security duties with renewed focus. He stopped drinking on the job entirely, finding that the clarity of mind allowed him to engage more deeply with the Bible readings that had become integral to his nights. One evening, while making his rounds, Michael noticed a "For Lease" sign in the window of a vacant storefront, a block from the commercial center. The building was small, with a retail space on the ground floor and what appeared to be an apartment above. Something about it caught his attention, and he found himself returning to look at it during his break. The next day, acting on an impulse he couldn't fully explain, he called the number on the sign. The rent was reasonable, the area wasn't prime real estate, and the landlord was willing to be flexible on terms. Michael scheduled a viewing, his mind racing with possibilities that would have seemed absurd just months before. That Sunday after church, he approached Pastor Williams with a proposal that had been forming in his mind. "I'm thinking about leasing a small building," he explained. The ground floor could be a drop-in center for homeless folks, somewhere warm to spend the day, maybe get a meal, use a computer to look for jobs, that sort of thing. The apartment upstairs could house a few people temporarily while they get back on their feet. Pastor Williams considered the idea. "It's ambitious," he said. "What resources do you have for this?" Michael grimaced. "Not much, some savings. My credit's shot from the business failure, but I could manage the first few months' rent. Beyond that," he shrugged. "I'm still working out the details." "You'd need help," the pastor pointed out. "Volunteers, donations, possibly grants." "I know," Michael admitted. "I'm not even sure why I'm considering this. 6 months ago, I barely cared about my own life, let alone anyone else's. Pastor Williams smiled. That's how God works sometimes. He plants a seed, and before you know it, you're watching it grow into something you never imagined. He paused, then added, Our church has been looking to expand our outreach ministries. Let me talk to the council about potentially partnering with you on this. Hope flared in Michael's chest, a sensation so unfamiliar he almost didn't recognize it. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. With the church's support, Michael leased the building and began renovations. Volunteers from the congregation helped with painting, repairs, and furnishing the space. Local businesses, approached by church members, donated furniture, computers, and kitchen equipment. Michael named the center Jeremiah's Place after the Bible verse that had first caught his attention. A small sign above the door featured the verse, For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Tom, who had become a friend rather than just someone Michael helped occasionally, was the first person Michael invited to stay in one of the 3 small bedrooms in the apartment above the center. With a stable place to live, Tom found work as a maintenance man at a nearby apartment complex. His presence at Jeremiah's Place provided valuable perspective as they developed programs and services. Michael continued working as a night watchman, using his days to oversee the center's operations. The schedule was grueling, but he found energy in the purpose that now drove him. Pastor Williams worried about burnout and frequently reminded Michael to rest, but Michael felt more alive than he had in years. Word of Jeremiah's Place spread through the homeless community. What began as a trickle of visitors soon became a steady stream of people seeking warmth, a meal, a shower, or simply a place to be treated with dignity. Volunteers helped with resume writing, job applications, and connecting visitors with social services. Not everyone who came through their doors found immediate success. Some visited once and never returned. Others came regularly but struggled with addiction, mental health issues, or circumstances that seemed insurmountable. Michael learned to celebrate small victories and to persevere through disappointments. 6 months after opening, while sorting through mail at the center, Michael found a letter with familiar handwriting. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized Sarah's elegant script on the envelope. Inside was a short note. Michael, I heard about the work you're doing at Jeremiah's Place from Connie Miller. You remember her from our old neighborhood. She volunteers with her church at a shelter downtown and mentioned meeting you there. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. The kids are doing well and ask about you sometimes. If you're open to it, maybe we could talk sometime. My number is the same. Sarah. Michael read the note 3 times, emotions swirling through him. Their separation had been painful but necessary. His drinking and depression following the business failure had created a toxic environment that wasn't good for anyone. He had understood her decision even as it tore him apart. That evening, he called the number. Sarah answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Sarah, it's me, Michael. A pause. I wasn't sure you'd call. I got your note, he said. Thank you. It meant a lot. Their conversation was cautious at first, gradually warming as they caught up on the children's activities and their respective lives. Michael shared the story of finding the Bible and how it had changed his perspective. Sarah listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. You seem different, she said finally. Your voice, the way you talk about things, it's like the old Michael before everything went wrong, but more. I am different, he acknowledged. I still have a long way to go, but I'm not the same person I was. Before they hung up, they arranged for Michael to see the children that weekend, his first visit in nearly 2 years. The prospect filled him with both joy and trepidation. The reunion with his children was awkward at first. Emma, now 13, regarded him with cautious eyes that held memories of his darkest days. 10-year-old Jake was more openly enthusiastic but still hesitant, as if afraid to invest too much emotion. They met at a park near Sarah's apartment, the neutral ground making it easier for everyone. Michael had brought simple gifts, a book for Emma about a topic she had mentioned liking during their phone conversation, and a model airplane kit for Jake. He had deliberately avoided extravagant presents that might seem like attempts to buy affection. As they walked through the park, stopping occasionally to watch ducks on the pond or for Jake to climb playground equipment, the initial tension gradually eased. Michael asked about school, friends, and activities, genuinely listening to their answers rather than merely filling silence. He shared stories about Jeremiah's place, carefully selecting ones that were age-appropriate while still honest about the realities of homelessness. "Why did you decide to help homeless people?" Emma asked suddenly, her perceptive eyes studying him. Michael considered her question carefully. "Because I know what it's like to feel lost," he said finally. "Not the same way they are. I always had a roof over my head. But I know what it feels like when life falls apart. And I learned that sometimes all it takes is one person showing they care to help someone find their way back." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Mom says you found God again." "I think it might be more accurate to say He found me," Michael replied with a small smile, "when I wasn't even looking." By the end of the afternoon, both children had relaxed considerably. Jake hugged him tightly before they left, and Emma, though still reserved, allowed a brief embrace. As Michael watched them walk away with Sarah, he felt a mixture of gratitude for the day and hope for more to come. Over the following months, these visits became regular occurrences. Sometimes they would go to movies or baseball games. Other times they would simply spend time at the park or help out at Jeremiah's place with age-appropriate tasks. Slowly, trust rebuilt between them. Michael's relationship with Sarah also evolved. They began having coffee occasionally after he dropped the kids off, their conversations growing increasingly comfortable. Neither mentioned reconciliation. There was too much history and too many changes to navigate such discussions hastily, but a foundation of friendship took root where bitterness had once flourished. Meanwhile, Jeremiah's place continued to grow. A local healthcare organization began sending medical volunteers once a week to provide basic care. A community college offered to hold GED preparation classes in their space. The church expanded its partnership, helping with funding and volunteer recruitment. 1 year after opening, they celebrated their first anniversary with a community meal that brought together current and former clients, volunteers, church members, and neighborhood residents. Michael stood at the front of the room, looking at the diverse gathering of people whose lives had intersected because of a small, leather-bound Bible found in a security guard's desk drawer. "When I started this journey," he told the assembled crowd, "I thought I was the one offering help. What I've learned is that we all need each other. Everyone in this room has something to give and something to receive. That's what Jeremiah's place is really about, not just providing services, but creating community." He glanced at Sarah and the children, who had come for the celebration. They smiled back at him, pride evident in their expressions. "The verse that inspired our name talks about plans for hope and a future." Michael continued, "I've seen that hope realized in so many ways this past year. In Tom finding steady employment, in Maria completing her GED, in Robert reconnecting with his family, in my own life being restored in ways I never thought possible." His voice caught slightly, and he took a moment to compose himself before finishing. "We still have challenges ahead. The need is greater than our resources. Not every story ends happily. But today, we celebrate the small miracles we've witnessed, and the larger ones we continue to hope for. Thank you all for being part of this journey." 2 years after finding the Bible, Michael finally left his security job. Through a combination of grants, donations, and a small but growing thrift store they had opened adjacent to the center, Jeremiah's place was able to offer him a modest salary as full-time director. The night before his final shift, Michael sat in the security booth where his transformation had begun. The Bible, now his own, as no one had ever claimed it, lay open on the desk. He had bought a new one for himself months ago, but for this last night, he wanted to read from the one that had first spoken to him. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "The kids want you to come for dinner tomorrow to celebrate your last night shift. 6 p.m., okay?" Their relationship had continued to evolve over the past year. They had begun dating again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as they discovered the people they had become in their time apart. Michael was not the same angry, depressed man who had retreated into a bottle. Sarah had found independence and strength she hadn't known she possessed. Together, they were exploring whether they could build something new from the ashes of what had been. "Perfect," he texted back. "Looking forward to it." The night passed quietly. Michael made his final rounds with a sense of gratitude rather than the resentment that had once accompanied these walks through empty corridors. As dawn approached, he gathered his few personal belongings and waited for his replacement. "You're looking cheerful for a guy who's been up all night," said Dave, the day shift guard, as he arrived. Michael smiled. "Just thinking about new beginnings." "That's right. Today's your last day. Going to miss this exciting job?" Dave asked with good-natured sarcasm. "Parts of it," Michael admitted. "It's where everything changed for me." As he walked out into the morning light, Michael reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had come to this building 3 years ago, a broken man, seeking only to survive until morning. He was leaving it whole, with purpose and connection restored to his life. At Jeremiah's place later that morning, he found Tom helping a new resident settle in, a young woman with a small child who had fled domestic violence. Tom had become the center's resident manager, living in the apartment upstairs and providing steady presence and practical wisdom. "Finishing one night watch and starting another, huh?" Tom said when he saw Michael. Michael nodded, understanding the metaphor. Different kind of watching, though. "Better kind," Tom agreed. "Not just guarding empty space, but watching out for people who need someone to see them." That evening, as Michael sat at Sarah's dining table with Emma and Jake, enjoying a homemade celebration dinner, he felt the fullness of the transformation in his life. The journey wasn't complete. There were still challenges in the relationship with his children, in the daily operation of Jeremiah's place, in his own continuing spiritual growth. But where once there had been emptiness, now there was meaning. Where there had been isolation, now there was community. Later, as he helped Sarah clean up while the kids watched a movie in the living room, she paused, looking at him thoughtfully. "You know what I've been thinking?" she said. "That Bible you found, what are the chances it would be in that drawer on that night when you needed it most?" Michael smiled. Pastor Williams would call that divine appointment. "What would you call it?" He considered the question. "I'd call it grace," he said finally. "Unearned favor showing up exactly when and where it was needed most." Sarah nodded, reaching for his hand. "Like second chances." "Exactly like second chances," he agreed, his fingers intertwining with hers. Outside, night was falling over Chicago, bringing with it the darkness Michael had once dreaded. Now, as he stood in the warm kitchen with the woman he loved, hearing the laughter of his children from the next room, he welcomed the night and its reminder of how far he had come. For the night watchman had found his true calling, not in guarding buildings, but in keeping vigil for those whom society had forgotten, illuminating paths forward with the same light that had shown him the way home.